Thank you and a very good evening. Somebody on the panel clearly doesn't like me to put me here after Manoj Jha, but I'll do my best to not completely fall flat. So my friend and colleague Manini Chatterjee is researching her forthcoming book at the Teen Murti Library, and she ran into some wonderful oral history, which is B.R. Nanda's interviews with Faiz, the legendary Urdu doyen Faiz. And there's large chunks of it of Faiz on Nehru. So I thought it was just so apt, and I banged into her yesterday, and she told me about it. One of the first things Faiz told B.R. Nanda in this interview was when he met Nehru before independence at a Progressive Writers Association meeting in 1940, Nehru buttonholed him and asked him, "Has none of you done a proper translation of the International?" So Faiz, etc., just backed off and said, no, I haven't done one. He said, well, that's the first thing you progressive writers should do. So I just imagine somebody who's going to be the first Prime Minister of independent India, 7 years before that, is telling communist Faiz that, have you done a translation of the International? And Faiz says, no, I haven't done it. And he says, well, that's the first thing you should be doing. But I don't think that should surprise people much, because this is something that comes up in Aditya's book too, that Hiren Mukherjee, a famous communist leader, MP, said it, that actually the word socialism in India owes Nehru a lot. And he actually put socialism on the political map of India. His kind of endorsement of the essential ideas of socialism actually made it much more easy to float and talk about it. There's more on Faiz. Faiz served time in jail thrice, and in between jail and out, he happened to meet Nehru several times. And he was once lounging in a coffee house in 1960, and he suddenly had one highly desperate Pakistani diplomat run up to him and said, Nehru wants to see you. So he said, what? He says he wants to see you at 3:45. Faiz was miffed, because that meant he couldn't put on a better scarf and, freshen up before it, but he turned up. And Nehru told him that, where were you? So Faiz told him that I've just been released from jail. And what Nehru told him was, whenever I meet you, you're either inside the prison, just come out, or just going in. Why don't you just settle down, stay inside the prison, or stay outside? And I think coming from somebody, like Nehru, who spent 9 years in jail, not knowing whether he'll be out, whether India will be free as a result of his efforts, that was quite something. There's a third incident I want to impose on you about Faiz visiting India in 1955, where he stayed at the Pakistani High Commissioner's residence. Now, as a tribute to Faiz, the High Commissioner organized a very big mushaira at his house. It was so big in those times that he needed microphones put outside on the road so people could hear him and participate. Mushaira is presided over by none less than S. Radhakrishnan, the Vice President of India. Next morning, the High Commissioner of Pakistan gets a call from Nehruji, who tells him that, this is unthinkable. How could you do this? You organize a mushaira for Faiz and you don't call me? Do one now again, and you need to invite me. So the Pakistani High Commissioner scurries somehow, gets a bunch of poets together the next day with one of them, and inside the house on a smaller scale, and Nehru turns up for that mushaira. And well after the mushaira is over, he's discussing the situation in Pakistan, in India, solutions, what could be done to keep people going. That was Nehru. So I think just somebody imagines, Manoj spoke of the context. Imagine Nehru's times. We think of those as very peaceful times when IIMs and IITs are being set up, and Nehru is going about organizing an India, inventing almost an independent India of us. In that context, to be able to speak to the High Commissioner to do these things, I think even 1/8 of this seems so impossible 24 years into this kind of new century. And I think this kind of man for all seasons that Nehru was is something that was not just a side part in the Nehru story. I think that really was a very essential element of how Nehru was able to imagine, work hard, and weave together a big idea of India, which he kind of did. And I want to congratulate the dogged Aditya Mukherjee for soldiering on, using his scholarship as ammunition for giving us all data, points, interestingly woven facts, picking everything, and doing what scholarship and historians do best, making the kind of past come alive, and making it so relevant to India's present and our future. And I think what's really essential to understand is that all of us come here, all of you all, what an illustrious audience, and this frightening panel. So all of us come here to not defend Nehru, really, because he was such a colossus. He doesn't need our defense. But I think what Nehru was the light And I think that's what Aditya Mukherjee's book is. It's kind of a huge torchlight to help us navigate the darkness through which India is now being firmly hurtled towards. And I think despite June 4, 2024, the concerted attempts at unweaving, just pulling the thread from the rug that's India is on. And that's why this book is so important. Not because we need to defend Nehru. He'll hold his own. He stands there handsome, tall, and brilliant. But I think we just need to use him as a torch to help us navigate the future. I think the India that grew out of this troubled, partitioned, is very essential to remember. And this is where Aditya's book goes a long way. The fact that you have India getting independent 2 years after you have the most vicious kind of nationalism of Europe, tearing the world apart. The fact that India adopts a composite nationalism, accepts words like equality, fraternity, justice, liberty, are all acts of extreme audacity and courage that Nehru almost single-handedly pulled. And I don't say that as an exaggeration, as if there were sort of two segments in the Congress and Nehru held one ground. If you really read now, and we are reading much more of Nehru and those times now, you find how single-handed and alone Nehru is, with his whole bunch of some extremely bad-tempered and angry chief ministers, all the satraps they were powerful people who held on, who did their best to bully Nehru. They did things like, welcoming the RSS people back into the Congress when Nehru was away on a trip abroad. He has to come back and reverse that and threaten that I'll resign if you do that. And that's when the party goes back and reverses this formulation. So Nehru was not only kind of battling the British, he was battling his own party, and his ability to kind of pull himself to be a kind of a scholar, an academic, an extremely eloquent man, and yet be a man of the people. And he was a popular figure. It was dangerous to go out and say that I will fight communalism alone at that time. It was not a popular idea. It seems like a very popular idea now, but imagine in the throes of a partitioned country, for somebody to go out with a gun in the capital and say that, come and get me. I can't imagine even the best of us having the courage, the gumption, and the conviction of doing that now. So I think what your book does is really about giving us this whole window into what Nehru did. And for me, we're all very familiar with what Gandhi did, when he goes to Naukhali on the 6th of November 1946, and he camps there for 4 difficult months. But there's also Nehru on his part, and I'd like to read from his book, where there are 3 very important quotations of Nehru which have been brought out. Nehru on his part also rushed to Bihar, and between 4th and 9th November 1946, along with virtually the entire top leadership of the Congress, Sardar Patel, Rajendra Prasad, Maulana Azad, Acharya Kripalani, Jayaprakash Narayan, Anugrah Narayan Sinha, and many others toured the affected areas, determined to stop the violence immediately. One by one, Nehru brandished all the weapons in his armory, the coercive power of the state, the prestige and ideals of the freedom struggle, the prestige and reverence for Gandhiji, his own personal prestige, and much else to bring things under control. And immediately, on reaching Bihar, this is what he says: I will stand in the way of Hindu-Muslim riots. Members of both communities will have to tread over my dead body before they can strike at each other. By 8th November, things were under control in Bihar. Independence comes with thousands of refugees pouring into East Punjab and Delhi, and he makes it very clear from Red Fort on 16th of August 1947 that communal strife would not be tolerated and India would not be the mirror image of Pakistan. He declares, the first charge of the government will be to establish and maintain peace and tranquility in the land and to ruthlessly suppress communal strife. It is wrong to suggest that in this country there would be the rule of a particular religion or sect. All who owe allegiance to the flag will enjoy equal rights of citizenship, irrespective of caste and creed. The very next day, Nehru was in Punjab, and in the first few weeks after independence, he was more in Punjab than in Delhi. Again, in a broadcast to the nation on 19th August 1947, he asserted in no uncertain terms, our state is not a communal state, but a democratic state, in which every citizen has equal rights. The government is determined to protect these rights. Nehru is among the very few kind of leaders that I can think of globally who made for brilliant nation builders after being extraordinarily revolutionaries. It's a different and, of course, a commendable thing to be a leader of pulling something out of, fighting colonial control, fighting for liberty and freedom. But after that, to transition into the building of a modern Indian state, it requires talents and things of another order, and Nehru embodied both. To me, I think very few leaders kind of meet up with that. mean, I can think of Nelson Mandela and very few others. Gandhi also, his guardian, really dies months after the independence. And in that, for Nehru to have forged a path where he also he disagreed with Gandhi on a lot of things. So he disagreed with his views on the economy, he disagreed with him on modern science, but to find the moral courage to push through with his ideas of institutions that supported science, scientific temper, that did not agree with Gandhi on the economy, and he did his thing. I think to be able to do that while retaining the essence of Gandhian principles that he stood for is also commendable, and it's so important. With Gandhi just dying in 48, so close to the time that Nehru gets about his business in the much understudied 1950s decade that really built the foundation of modern India. I want to close close my words with recalling a discussion on Nehru right here in Jawahar Bhavan. Now, this was either in 2022 or 2023, I don't remember, when Manishankar Iyer, Manoj Jha and Sitaram Yechuri were in discussion with Atul Chaurasia about Nehru's role. All speakers spoke eloquently, and Sitaram Yechuri listed his problems with some of Nehru's actions, all that he could have done and did not do. He mentioned the dismissal of EMS Namboodiripada's government, India's first communist government in Kerala prominently, but then he made his larger point. He said, we have no hesitation in accepting his role as the architect of modern India. हम उस भूमिका को सिर्फ स्वीकार नहीं करते हैं, हम उसका आदर करते हैं. He had said, I translate for those who don't know Hindi, not only do we acknowledge his role as the architect of modern India, but we respect it. And I think there is no better tribute to Nehru than that, in my view, 6 decades after he was laid to rest. So thank you, Aditya, for sifting the truth from facts and giving us this eminently readable, lovely, scholarly book.